According to reports from inside the paddock, the Mercedes 2026 engine sets the pace compared to other engine manufacturers. In today's video, we are going to look at the performance advantages that Mercedes has. We will also obviously look at the situation at Red Bull with Hadjar, who will race for Red Bull in 2026, Tsunoda, who will leave Formula 1 as an official driver, and we will also see the promotion of Lindblad in Racing Bulls, with Lawson as his teammate. So let's look at the driver market, talk about engines, and get started right away. Before we start, I remind you to leave a like, subscribe, and activate notifications so you don't miss any videos on the channel. That said, guys, big news because it seems that in 2026, Mercedes will set the pace in terms of engines. In fact, F1 Insider claims that Mercedes' internal combustion engine for 2026 is the best in the category with a declared power of 571 horsepower, well above the competition, obviously regarding the thermal part. It is said that Audi is 20-30 horsepower behind on the internal combustion engine front, and it's a deficit similar to the current Red Bull, as electrical energy accounts for the remaining 50% of the engines, because we know that next year the engine will be divided into 50% internal combustion and 50% electric part, so the electric part increases in power. It is expected that Mercedes' strength next year will be in hybrid technology, particularly in the MGU-K systems, which will make the difference. We know that this year there is still the MGH, which next year will no longer be there. There will only be the MGU-K, responsible for energy recovery, and in this, Mercedes seems to be clearly ahead of everyone else. This is what's being said inside the paddock. So watch out for everyone who will also become, let's say, Mercedes clients. In fact, we see Renault, for example, that Alpine will abandon the Renault engine. This is the last race of the French engine manufacturer that will take place in Abu Dhabi. And so the Alpine team also bid farewell to the Renault power unit by putting all the names on the engine. This is a nice gesture and a very important moment because next year it will be a historic turning point to see an Alpine with a Mercedes engine. It will be very strange, and we will see if Mercedes will actually provide the current engines, meaning will they supply the 2026 engine with the same specifications as the parent company, or where will they modify it for customers? This is a real unknown, because obviously so far they have always provided identical engines, so much so that McLaren itself this year can compete for the Constructors' Championship, has won the Constructors' Championship, and can compete for the Drivers' Championship, thanks also to a very efficient power unit, the Mercedes, which allows for more refined aerodynamic development compared to all the other engine manufacturers that use different engines. However, in this, if we want, McLaren has surpassed Mercedes in aerodynamics, and this has made the difference because using the same engine, they are equal in power, but it's how you exploit the downforce that makes the difference. And this will be important next year because if Mercedes clients do better than Mercedes itself, well, this would be a huge setback as it happened this year with McLaren. So Mercedes certainly cannot afford this, and it will be a topic of discussion, a very important topic. Certainly the fact that Alpine will use the Mercedes engine will be an interesting thing. We see that Alpine will make its launch in 2026, and there will be a launch event on January 23rd in Barcelona before the pre-season tests, which I remind you are from January 26th to 30th in Barcelona, and we will see how it will be. Certainly, Pierre Gasly has very high expectations for Alpine next year. This year, Alpine did very poorly. Let's also look at the standings together. Alpine is currently last, so truly a season to forget for Alpine, and we'll see if they can redeem themselves next year. I think they will be a bit of the underdog next year in the sense that they are the team no one expects much from, but will do very well thanks to the Mercedes engine. And we need to see if then work well on aerodynamics and obviously try to have a better season next year. There was Colapinto, who was confirmed at Alpine. Moreover, Colapinto finds himself in 20th, which is practically last, with 0 points. The only driver without points. Obviously, there is also Jack Doohan, but he's done few races. So Colapinto, guys, it's really a negative season for him, and despite this, they renewed him. So it will be interesting to see the situation at Alpine, how it will evolve, if it will be able to make a step forward. And obviously also watch out for McLaren, as they will also use Mercedes engines. Watch out for Mercedes itself, which will be the first potential team that could compete for the World Championship. it seems to be favored by several internal rumors in the paddock. We'll see if they will be confirmed. I have to be honest, I want to tell you my opinion. Looking at the 2014 hybrid era, I expect a strong Mercedes. Because, guys, at the beginning of the 2014 hybrid era, Mercedes had a huge lead over other teams in terms of engine development, and they managed to make a big difference in the recovery of energy from the hybrid engine, including the electric part. And they also taught their rivals a lesson in this. Then they caught up on the aerodynamics level. But if we remember, in 2014, the engine advantage was greater than the aerodynamic advantage they had. Then, over the years, they improved aerodynamically, making a step forward by introducing various solutions that improved drivability. I remember, for example, the DAS, and obviously we remember the V10, the V11, cars with strong aerodynamic load, which came from years when the engine was a guarantee for Mercedes. So, in my opinion, the 2014 scenario could repeat itself a bit. The only difference is that there will also be some help, a sort of BOP to balance the performance between the engine manufacturers, which will be an aid in terms of engine development hours next year. So the engine manufacturers who fall behind will be able to catch up with Mercedes. This is a point to consider if Mercedes will obviously be first among the engine manufacturers. And having said that, let's also talk about today's big news. Obviously, Isack Hadjar at Red Bull. Guys, this Red Bull lineup for 2026 will have Max Verstappen and Isack Hadjar. And I'm really thrilled for Hadjar, guys, because from the very first race, I said he was special. Let's wait. Let's wait for Hadjar to arrive. He's a great driver. He's really strong. And we know how the first race went. He retired before the start on the formation lap, making that mistake in the wet in Australia. But from then on, he has made an incredible evolution. Even Helmut Marko criticized him at the beginning, saying you can't cry, you can't have that frustration he showed in the first race. On the contrary, Hamilton's father went up to Hadjar to console him. We know that Hadjar is a big fan of Lewis Hamilton, and he has shown us a bit of Hadjar's fragility, which is normal even for a rookie who made a mistake. That was his chance of a lifetime to show in Formula 1. He made that small mistake in Australia, obviously in impossible conditions because the track was completely wet. But despite that, he bounced back and had an incredible season. Let's look at the results together, and then we'll obviously also talk about Tsunoda. But guys, look at Hadjar's season. Hadjar is currently 10th in the driver's standings, and since the retirement in Australia, he has finished 11th, 8th, 13th, 10th, 11th. Then he had a streak of scoring points. 9th, 6th, 7th in Miami, Imola and Monaco. And then he finished 3rd in the Netherlands, which we all remember. A great performance there too. After the summer break, he had a remarkable race in my opinion, and then confirmed his consistency. From there on, he kept fighting in the points zone. Then of course, Racing Bulls in the last races in my opinion underperformed a bit, but still 8th in Brazil with the sprint race 10th, and then 6th in Las Vegas, overall good. 9th in Qatar in the sprint race, then unfortunately retired in the race. However, Hadjar is a confirmation of the consistency he has shown this year. This year, guys, Hadjar has had a great rookie season. In my opinion, he was the best rookie of the season, on par, if we want, with Kimi in the last races, who is doing really well. But Kimi had an initial period of difficulty, of course, we all know that, and on the contrary, Hadjar has been much more consistent from start to finish in my opinion. Also having less pressure, obviously, than Kimi, because Kimi, racing in Mercedes and taking Lewis Hamilton's place, had very high expectations, even if one tries to ease the pressure. But it's inevitable, those who race for a top team have it regardless. He himself, in my opinion, suffered from pressure in the sense that he imposed it on himself, especially in the circuits he knew. On the contrary, he might have been faster in circuits he didn't know. This Kimi Antonelli, while Hadjar had much less pressure on him because the official Red Bull driver beyond Max Verstappen was first Lawson, then we saw Tsunoda. Red Bull did well not to change mid-year, even though Tsunoda might not have been convincing. They didn't swap the Racing Bulls and Red Bull drivers, so between Hadjar and Tsunoda during the season. This was important for Hadjar's growth, and they gave Tsunoda every chance in the world, who unfortunately, in my opinion, couldn't hold up, let's say, the comparison with Verstappen, both in driving level and also in character. In my opinion, he's a bit lacking. Surely Tsunoda had a season at the level of Lawson, but having a Red Bull, so that's worth mentioning. but there's always a bit of secret of this Red Bull dual driver's curse. That's always there. And so I am super happy for Hadjar. We'll see if he manages to prove himself. Let's hope he won't be the umpteenth victim of the Red Bull system. This is important to say. Predictable that it would happen, says Simon. I'm sorry that Tsunoda has been yet another driver destroyed by the Milton Keynes and Helmut Marko grinder. And it's true, because once again, Tsunoda has been destroyed by the system, if you will. Red Bull, that doesn't work, and we've said it many times. Let's hope they behave better with Hadjar, and that 2026 will be a new beginning for Red Bull. I think so, and I'll tell you why. In my opinion, it's a new beginning for Red Bull because Red Bull knows it can't guarantee Max Verstappen. In the sense that Max Verstappen isn't guaranteed to stay with Red Bull forever. He will go to the team that will be more competitive in the new regulatory era, which isn't necessarily Red Bull. It could be maybe Mercedes, maybe Aston Martin. We don't know. And so, assuming that Max Verstappen won't necessarily stay with Red Bull has realized that they need to look for a leading driver beyond Max. And that lead driver could be Hadjar, who is a driver with a very strong character. You can hear it in the team radio. He's not a passive driver, if you will. And despite being a rookie, he has a very strong character, which is what Red Bull needs, in my opinion. A driver a bit like Max, in the sense that he has a bit of courage, a bit of strength. Not a passive driver. Let me use the term. And so, in my opinion, Hadjar is the perfect profile for Red Bull. The only thing is, he's had some friction with Helmut Marko. That's true. We'll see, because Helmut Marko often changes his mind. So this will definitely have an impact. Helmut Marko, in my opinion, won't be with Red Bull for life. And so I think he could be the right profile for Red Bull. Although I see Red Bull a bit negatively for the future regarding the technical level. Ford will arrive as a partner of Red Bull for the development of the electric part of the engine. Red Bull will produce their own engines in Milton Keynes and will also be an engine manufacturer. But this is a difficult path that takes years of development, of course. And for this reason, I see Red Bull a bit more in difficulty compared to other top teams next year. And for this reason, I think Max might change teams, maybe go to Aston Martin or Mercedes, more likely Aston Martin. And so this is a situation that Red Bull will definitely have to manage. We'll see. Pay attention to Lindblad as well, of course, who will be the new teammate instead of Lawson. Here it is. This is the Racing Bulls lineup with Lawson and Lindblad. Lindblad, a great driver, coming from Formula 2, in my opinion. He can do very well. He has already proven in private tests with Red Bull that he can deliver good performances. He impressed in those tests, he did. And so I think he'll be a good benchmark with Lawson if he manages to beat him. In my opinion, Lindblad's goal next year is to beat Lawson, meaning in the driver standings he needs to finish ahead of him. I see Lawson a bit more in difficulty. We'll see, because managing Lindblad won't be easy for Red Bull in the future. I see a good pairing with Lindblad and Hadjar, but obviously Lindblad still has to prove himself. So we'll see next year. But Red Bull did well to promote Lindblad as an official Racing Bulls driver. And I think they did well to remove Tsunoda in this case. Meaning that Tsunoda was in the Red Bull sphere, both in Red Bull and Racing Bulls more, because Red Bull used Honda engines. And so there was that agreement between Honda and Red Bull to have a Japanese driver within the Red Bull sphere. And from the moment Red Bull stopped using Honda engines, that agreement obviously ended as well. So there's no need to have a Japanese driver within the Red Bull sphere. For this reason, Tsunoda has also been left out. If you'll excuse the term, he'll still be a reserve driver and test driver. So, but he won't be an official driver anymore for this reason. Of course, I send a hug to Tsunoda, who is a super genuine, super nice driver, and we will miss him for his comments, his interviews. But anyway, I think it's right that Red Bull has taken this step. Just for completeness, this is the complete 2026 lineup with all the confirmed drivers. And of course, with the addition of Cadillac as the 11th team. But we also need to talk about Ferrari, because there are some news. He hopes to have some satisfaction in Abu Dhabi. We know he has always been quite strong in Abu Dhabi. Last year, he made a sensational comeback. In the first lap, he recovered 11 positions, starting from 19th and finishing 8th at the end of the first lap. So he can do well this year. I expect a stronger Ferrari in Abu Dhabi compared to what we saw in Qatar. Certainly also thanks to the characteristics of the track. but we also need to read Lewis Hamilton's statements. Lewis Hamilton, who says, "I don't have a message at the moment. I'm sorry, I'm really grateful for all the support I've received throughout the year. I could never have done it without them." This is the message obviously addressed to his fans, also referring to the entire Ferrari team that has supported him. So still we rise, still we rise. Hamilton's message, we will grow together again. We'll see how 2026 goes. Let's hope Lewis maintains patience. I know it's difficult, but strength and courage. We know that Ferrari has renewed the partnership with Philip Morris, which continues for over half a century, so a very long partnership between Ferrari and Philip Morris. Renewed. Let's move on to another important piece of news about Lewis Hamilton, who spoke with John Elkann after Qatar, and specifically talking about Ferrari's performance in Qatar. And there are some contrasts between Lewis Hamilton and John Elkann on Ferrari's performance, and we hope there will be a turnaround for Ferrari, at least for next year. This is the most important thing. We'll see. We'll see. I also want to relay Lewis Hamilton's words, who also spoke about the internal situation at Ferrari, because many of the engineers and mechanics working for Ferrari return home to their wives. In short, there is quite a tense environment at Ferrari because there is a lot of controversy out of it, and so many media criticize the members of Ferrari, making it quite a difficult situation to manage. So we still need to support the internal environment. Despite everything, we mustn't go beyond. It's right to criticize because it's important to point out the problems, but we mustn't go too far. This is important to say. And Lewis Hamilton rightly emphasized this, having said that, I also want to show this last thing about a 2.2 million update that came in 2025, which really cost a lot. In fact, we're talking about the update to the rear suspension, of course. It was tested at Mugello and then went to Spa-Francorchamps, and that was the worst update Ferrari has done this year because it didn't bring any improvements to the car. They expected to significantly improve the car, especially in corner exit traction, and in truth, Ferrari didn't improve that much, which indicates that Ferrari's problem this year is indeed a structural chassis problem that can't be changed concretely, and this non-functional update has demonstrated that. And having said that, it's also worth noting that Leclerc wanted to continue updates on the SF25, while conversely, there was an internal rift, a division within Ferrari between those who wanted to continue with the updates and those who wanted to stop focus solely on 2026, which is what they eventually did. So, the second faction, if we may call it that, within Ferrari won, and many say this was a mistake for the red team. We'll see. It will be important to judge next year if this was a mistake or not, because stopping early to focus on 2026 means that next year you have no more excuses. If you fail next year, you take all the responsibility, and you can say you made a huge mistake last year by stopping the updates early. So this is an important point because now there are no more alibis. Did you stop early for the 2026 updates? Well, then you can no longer say, we didn't have enough time to develop the car. You can't say such a thing. You have no more excuses. This is an important thing to say. And so we'll see if this decision will have a positive outcome or not next year. The very last thing I tell you as an insider, beware that McLaren did not celebrate Oscar Piastri's podium in Qatar. And this is a moment that cannot be forgiven, if we want to say, because they didn't bring their crew under the podium to celebrate their driver. These are images that obviously saddened the situation, and also Oscar Piastri himself, who in my opinion is in a team that does not support him 100%. In my opinion, at this moment, McLaren is much more aligned with Norris than with Piastri, and this is an evident fact. We also saw the story that Oscar Piastri himself published supporting this theory, and it's a difficult situation to manage, especially now that Leonardo Folaroli is entering McLaren's young talent program. In my opinion, McLaren is starting to look around to see which driver in the future, not next year, but in a few years perhaps, we might see in place of Oscar Piastri, because Norris seems to be increasingly becoming McLaren's #1 driver. However, obviously, we don't have definite confirmation because they always maintain this attitude of pure parity at the media and public level. However, internally, it seems that this notion is becoming increasingly popular, let's say. So we'll see if my McLaren's philosophy also changes a bit at the public level, and if the drivers themselves will change as well. If Norris stays and Piastri leaves, well, we will have the answer to this question. That said, let me know in the comments your opinion on all the topics we discussed in the video. As always, I remind you to leave a like, which is essential to support the videos on the channel. I sincerely thank you for all the messages of support. Subscribe and activate notifications so you always stay updated on all Formula 1 and Ferrari related news. That's all from Rasta. See you in the next video.